Today's video is all about my favorite delay pedal, and that is the Providence DLY 83, better known as the Providence Delay 80s. And this just beautiful sounding delay pedal, I just can never say enough good things about it. It's honestly my favorite delay pedal, probably because I've never played a Pete Cornish TES, but this pedal is essentially Providence's heavily inspired take on the Pete Cornish TES. It's not just a straight clone, but it's definitely inspired by that pedal. And today we're going to be going over how John Mayer uses this pedal live, especially during the sob rock era. So let's get right on into today's video. Now, I kind of did a part one to this video where I did the exact same thing, going over when John Mayer uses the Providence chrono delay. And in that video, I mentioned that the chrono delay only really has half of the delay responsibilities on any given night, because the Providence Delay 80s is the second delay pedal that John Mayer relies on. And although the Providence chrono delay does have a really, awesome feature set, especially with that tap tempo, which John would rely on quite, consistently, the Providence Delay 80s, and our key focus of today's video, actually sounds quite different compared to the Providence chrono delay. And the main reason why Providence, stopped producing the the Delay 80s is because they just ran out of the chips to be able to produce this pedal. And when they couldn't do that, the Providence chrono delay was then born. So this pedal actually sounds, fairly different when you compare it to the chrono delay. It's a lot more warmer and just overall sits in the mix, differently than the Providence chrono delay does, even though you have a mix knob. It's hard to describe, but it feels different, underneath your fingers when you're using this delay pedal, and it does sound different. The repeats just have a different character to them. So that's why John uses two different delays as well. He gets kind of a more, traditional delay pedal with, a bunch of great feature sets with the chrono. But then if you want something that's a bit more reminiscent of that Pete Cornish TES style delay, well, that's what he's got the Providence Delay 80s for. So our very first example today is going to be Slow Dancing in a Burning Room. And now this is a song that I mentioned again in kind of part one, where John would not only use the chrono delay, but he also would use the Delay 80s. Now let's take a look at an example. Now for Slow Dancing in a Burning Room, essentially what John would do is during kind of the bridge section between the final chorus and the outro solo, he would turn on the Providence Delay 80s, and then of course he'd turn on his drive pedals for the solo, and then he'd be off to the races for the big final outro solo. But the delay you would hear is from the Providence Delay 80s. Now, our next example of John using the Providence Delay 80s is from one of my all-time favorite Mayer songs ever, and when I heard it live during the Sob Rock tour, I was just super stoked beyond belief to finally hear that one performed live, and it's Edge of Desire. Now, Edge of Desire, John would use the Providence Delay 80s for the chorus section. As well as into the solo. He would not have it on for the verse, but for the chorus, he would activate the Providence Delay 80s, and let's take a look at that example. while you guys are joining me on a totally new day than I originally filmed this video because my mic died just about halfway through filming. So reshooting the back second part of this video. So anyways, in Edge of Desire that you guys just saw there, John was using the Providence Delay 80s just to add some delay in terms of the chorus and the solo. Now keep in mind, this example is not something John would do every single time he performed that song. I've watched quite a lot of different performances over the Sob Rock tour, and delay was something that John used maybe half the time. For Edge of Desire, there's not a ton of great footage of him using the delay 80s where you can actually see, like the example I just showed you guys, where you can clearly see his pedal board, you know, from higher up in the stands, and you can clearly see him stepping on the Providence Delay 80s there. Just one example of him doing it during that song, but it's definitely not something he did every single time, so just keep that in mind. Moving on to the next example we're going to go over here, it's changing. Now, in the very first kind of, again, part to this video where I go over John's use of the Providence chrono delay, I mentioned in that video that he uses the chrono delay for changing, and it's the same story with the Providence Delay 80s. He sometimes would use that pedal for the delay during the solo of Changing. And Changing is one of those songs where what effects John used in terms of delay or anything extra like a lumen for reverb, it kind of depended on the night, and he would change kind of what he was going to use depending on how he felt. Now, sometimes it was the Providence chrono delay, sometimes it was the Providence Delay 80s, sometimes there was no delay at all. And the best way that we can tell what delay pedal John is using is, of course, by knowing what his pedal board looks like. And essentially, if he's stepping usually with his right foot on the right side of his pedal board, that's the Providence chrono delay. If he's using his left foot to step on the left side of his pedal board, that's the Providence Delay 80s, because we know that second row of his pedal board was Providence chrono delay, Way Huge Octopus Mark 1, then the Providence Delay 80s. So if he's activating a delay pedal, then we can kind of tell based on just where he's stepping as well on the pedal board, and usually with what foot, what exact pedal he's using. So let's take a look at Changing here. Whispering in my ear, so you follow your activities, you apply, but hearts keep changing, hearts keep changing. So far, we've gone over 3 examples of John using the Providence Delay 80s during the Sob Rock tour. I want to give one last example, but this one is going to be from the 2019 World Tour. Now, my friend Alejandro, who runs John Mayer Gear on Instagram, you guys all know him, he saved this really awesome behind-the-scenes clip that Guitar Center posted when they were shooting that Musings with the Silver Sky video that they did with John Mayer during rehearsals for the 2019 World Tour. And in it, you can actually see John activate the unblacked out version of the Providence Delay 80s when he launches into demoing Vultures. So it's really interesting to see John using the Providence Delay 80s for Vultures during the 2019 World Tour, when during the Sob Rock tour, the few times at least that he played Vultures, he was actually using the Providence chrono delay. So a bit of an evolution in his delay choices, and obviously different settings for the two pedals between tours, but kind of cool to at least see, okay, Providence Delay 80s for the 2019 World Tour. Then for Sob Rock, he went and switched to the Providence chrono delay. I've done a whole video on the Providence chrono delay. I've mentioned that a couple times, I think, in this video. Go check it out if you guys haven't already. It'll be carded up on your screen. The last thing I think worth chatting about near the end of this video is one song in particular that John isn't using the Providence Delay 80s on, but I think it would sound absolutely fantastic. And it's from the Continuum era. There's a really iconic performance from Where the Light Is where John uses delay for an introduction of a song. You guys can probably guess where I'm going. It's Belief. On Where the Light Is, when John launches into Belief and he's playing just that beautiful, kind of intro solo with the Pete Cornish TES going, it's one of my favorite parts of Where the Light Is. And I think the Providence Delay 80's being such a heavily inspired take on the Pete Cornish TES, and again a little bit of its own thing, but that pedal would do such a fantastic job of replicating that sound, or at least doing a newer version, newer take on that sound. But for the Sob Rock tour, at least, John isn't using delay for the intro of Belief. His tone is just so raw and in your face. It definitely doesn't need delay going by any means, but at the same time I can't help but wonder what that Providence Delay 80's would sound like if he did kind of a similar thing like he did for the Belief introduction during Where the Light Is. I think it could be really cool. The one thing I've definitely kind of realized, I guess, in making these two videos on the Chrono Delay and the Delay 80's is while John does use a lot of delay, because he's using two different delays, for a bit of different purposes and kind of context at least, it doesn't actually seem like a lot when you dive down to the level of analyzing how he uses one specific delay. This video wasn't just a ton of examples, it was a handful, and the same thing with the Chrono. But when you combine them together, you really kind of understand that delay is a pretty important effect in the context of John Mayer's sound, context of John Mayer's gear. And one thing that I see a lot of is when people build John Mayer-inspired pedal boards, at least, is a lot of times people will leave out long delay. They'll get the octopus in for slapback, and I think maybe that's partially because a lot of people think John, leaves the octopus on all the time, which is a really big misconception with his gear. But people tend to leave out the long delay in their John Mayer inspired pedal board builds, at least. And, it doesn't have to be a full clone or anything, but when they're kind of tuning for, covering or, getting in the realm of his sound, long delay is something I see get left out quite a bit. And it's actually pretty important to his sound. And it's something he does use fairly often, Every show he's using it a handful of times at least, right? So something to think about for sure, and something that's kind of gotten me thinking a little bit. Anyways, you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't, again, checked out the one I did on the Chrono Delay or the Octopus or John going to Scream Right to Klon, please check out all of those videos if you haven't already, and consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this video as well. Really helps the channel grow and, lets me know I'm doing a good job, and you're not going to really get recommended my content more than you are from watching this one already. It's weird how YouTube works, but that's just the way it goes. And as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Take care. We'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.